Civilians. Joining us right now, Illinois Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger. Congressman, good to see you. Thanks so much for joining us.
You too. Thanks,
the implications of this report from your standpoint.
Well, I think it's not good. Keep in mind, we're not running a lot of special ops ground missions in Yemen anyway. A lot of this is kind of drone activity and stuff like that. My guess is, look, the Yemeni government kind of has to save a little face in this. Obviously, civilians were killed in this mission, but let's not forget, this is warfare. And in Yemen, I mean, you have it's a tribalistic society. They're very good at fighting. A lot of times you can have special ops approach a target, and they can hear you coming from a long ways away. They've been doing this for generations. So, you know, the idea that we're going to be able to do this without it necessarily sometimes hitting some roadblocks is unrealistic. But the fact is, war is very dangerous. It's very messy, and in some cases, things don't always go correctly.
I mean, this isn't really surprising, right? This isn't, I mean, do you think this is something that'll go away eventually, or do you think it's something that's going to have to be addressed? I mean, what's the next move here?
Look, I think it's eventually going to have to go away because Yemen doesn't want al-Qaeda on their territory. Right. Yemen's in the middle of this civil war. And, you know, so the fact is, do you want the United States helping you or don't you? And if you do, you're going to have to accept some level of risk with that. You know, we have the best military in the world. But they're not perfect. They can't always predict everything that's going to happen on the battlefield. And if you find yourself in some massive resistance, like happened in Yemen, they did a great job of fighting their way out of it. And with the exception of the casualty and some injuries, it was really a one-sided battle. But the fact is, you know, look, not everything goes perfectly at all times. That's war. That's why it's called warfare.
Congressman, what are your expectations in terms of the budget? I mean, senior Pentagon officials want to increase the defense budget by more than $30 billion. That's according to documents obtained by the Associated Press. And, of course, it comes as another report finds that nearly two-thirds of the Navy's strike fighter planes are sitting unused because there's not enough funding to repair them. So you were Air National Guard. Are funding shortfalls actually impairing national security?
They are, and I still fly for the Guard, and I can tell you, you know, flying hours cut. We're losing pilots in the Air Force, Air National Guard, because they're not able to have bonuses to keep them there. They're going to the airlines and other places. This is a very serious problem. And I mean, we have a decision to make as a country. Do we want to be able to go and destroy al-Qaeda and ISIS where they exist, or do we want to just put up the walls and say we don't care what happens to the rest of the world? Well, I know we don't want to do that last part, so we're going to have to invest in, it's not just investing in the soldiers today, it's the next generation of body armor that's going to be out in 10 years. It's the next Stryker vehicle that's going to be out in 10 or 15 years. That's what we need to do. And, you know, look, we have some tough budget decisions to make. A guy like me who's 39 years old, maybe Social Security can look a little different for somebody like me to preserve it for current generations, but to save the budget in the long run. These are tough conversations to have, but that's why people hire us to come out and do that, not just tell them what they want to hear.
So you want the money to come from entitlements then? I mean, that's where's the money going to come from? We're having this whole debate about tax reform. The money's got to come from somewhere.
I mean, the fact is, two-thirds of it is spent on that, and nobody, I've never heard anybody out here talk about affecting it for current seniors, but people try to do that in scare tactics. But younger people like me, look, if you tell me that we have to do a little change at Social Security when I retire, I can plan on that. I have 20 years to do it. So I think that's where some discussion, tax reform is important, growing the economy is important, and making sure we're not wasting.
Well, Congressman, tell those lawmakers down there that they ought to read the Medicare trustees report every year because it's going broke, I think, in 11 years, where Medicare is going to end up paying out about 85 cents on the dollar in benefits if you guys don't do something to fix it.
You see that in Social Security, too. I mean, the fact is the numbers are there, and the other side of the aisle for me likes to pretend like somehow somebody's making those numbers up, but we really have to have this grown-up conversation. The problem is the second you thing, the other side spends, you know, $1 trillion against you on television and says you want to take away grandma's Social Security, which is the furthest thing from the truth. We want to save it.
Granny off the cliff. Granny off the cliff. Remember that ad?
Well, Congressman, obviously the country has to make some priorities, and you and your colleagues have a difficult choice to make. There are many things that are funded that we can no longer afford. Also, Americans are working a lot longer, and because of better health care, we're more productive. But one of the things that is troubling is the military morale. We are not attracting as many young people to our military service, in part because of how our nation treats our veterans when they come home, especially when they come home after being injured on the battlefield, and how we treat their families when their families loses a loved one to our military conflicts. What are you all going to do about addressing that?
Well, look, it's improved a lot. I mean, when I came back from Iraq in 2009, I mean, the military is asking you a lot of questions, making sure, you know, your thoughts are right, that if you need help, you can get it. There's a lot more to do. The fact is, military service is really difficult. It's hard. It's hard for a family. It's hard for a military member. And people choose to do this because of their dedication to country. And so I think, you know, we need to match benefits with what we're asking people to do. You know, as I mentioned with pilots, because I'm familiar with that since I fly still, you know, you can go work for one of the airlines now and make pretty close to $250,000 after a handful of years, but the military is not able to keep up with that pay scale. And so these are the kinds of things that we have to keep in mind when we want to attract the best and the brightest.
All right, we will leave it there. Congressman, good to see you. Thanks so much for joining us this morning.